The marketplace was alive with noise, filled with bright banners and the smell of alien food drifting through the air. Yet at the very center of it all, the atmosphere was not one of joy, but of cruelty. A raised platform stood in the middle, with cages lined up behind it. Inside those cages, living beings waited like objects, their eyes downcast, their futures already decided by the highest bidder. The crowd pushed closer, eager to see the next item that would be brought out for sale. From one of the cages, guards dragged out a tiny figure. It was a girl, thinner and smaller than any alien present. Her skin was pale, her limbs delicate, and she looked no older than a child. When she stumbled on the platform, laughter erupted from the crowd. Many shouted insults, calling her useless, broken, not worth even a scrap of food. The auctioneer lifted her arm to show the audience, but even he struggled to keep a straight face. "This one," the auctioneer announced, "is barely worth the cage she was kept in. A servant? No. A worker? Impossible. Too small, too weak, too fragile. But still alive, and life has its price. Let's begin at the lowest value." The crowd roared with mocking laughter. Some called out jokes, others turned away as if disgusted. The girl's wide eyes searched the sea of faces, desperate for mercy, but all she found was ridicule. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. She knew she was unwanted, and her small body shook as if she already accepted her fate. The auctioneer tapped his stick on the podium. "1 credit," he said, mocking even the starting number. "Who will take this worthless creature for 1? No hand rose. The laughter grew louder. "Not even worth feeding," one alien shouted. "Throw her back to the gutter," another added. Some even tossed scraps of trash toward the stage, making the girl flinch and curl into herself. "Come, someone take her," the auctioneer barked, his voice half amused, half frustrated. "She is alive. She can clean floors or amuse children. Surely one of you has pity." Still no hands. The silence after the laughter made the scene even heavier. The girl lowered her head, believing the worst. She was nothing here. Not even her own kind wanted her. Then, from the very back of the hall, a single hand rose. It was not quick or hesitant. It lifted calmly, firmly, and did not fall. The hand was human. The crowd turned as one. Murmurs spread instantly. A human? Here? What was he doing at an auction like this? And why would he raise his hand for something so pitiful? The auctioneer blinked, surprised. "You? The human? Are you serious? This one? For 1 credit?" The human said nothing. His face was calm, unreadable, but his hand remained high. His eyes, steady and focused, never left the girl trembling on the stage. Laughter returned, but this time it was sharper, directed at him instead of the girl. "The human wants her," someone shouted. "Maybe he collects trash," another jeered. The hall filled with taunts, yet the man did not move, did not lower his hand. The auctioneer, sensing a chance for entertainment, grinned. "Very well, 1 credit from the human. Do I hear 2? For a moment, silence. Then another alien raised a hand, smirking. 2 credits, he said mockingly, his eyes never leaving the human. He didn't want the girl. He only wanted to humiliate. The human's eyes flicked to him for a second, then returned to the girl. His hand stayed up. 3. The crowd laughed louder. Another alien joined in. 4. The game had begun. They had no interest in the girl's life, only in mocking the human who dared to show it. Hands went up, numbers called out, prices rising not from value but from scorn. Yet every time, the human matched the bid without hesitation. His voice was calm, his face steady, his hand never lowering. 5, 6, 7. The girl's wide eyes now stared at him. For the first time, someone was fighting for her. She couldn't understand why. Her heart pounded, confusion mixing with a tiny spark of hope. The bidding continued, but slowly the laughter weakened. The human never faltered, and each number he spoke sounded heavier, stronger. Soon, fewer aliens raised their hands. The game no longer felt amusing. Finally, silence fell. No one else bid. The auctioneer hesitated, looking at the human again. Sold to the human. His voice carried both disbelief and mockery, but the hammer came down. The girl was shoved toward the edge of the platform, still trembling, still unsure. She expected him to laugh, to throw her aside like all the others. But the human walked forward through the crowd, his steps calm, unshaken by the stares or the whispers. The crowd parted as he passed, their eyes filled with confusion and curiosity. He reached the stage and without a word took hold of the girl's small hand. His grip was firm, steady, nothing like the cruel hands that had dragged her before. The marketplace fell silent again. Every eye was on them. 1,000 unspoken questions filled the air. Why her? Why him? What did a human see in someone so worthless? The girl looked up at him, expecting to see pity or mockery in his face. Instead, she saw determination, as if he had chosen her for a reason no one else could understand. And as he led her off the platform, the whispers grew louder, but he never looked back. His hand had gone up once, and it had never gone down. The crowd had not stopped staring at the human. Even after the hammer fell, their voices rose like a storm, filled with ridicule and disbelief. Aliens of all shapes and sizes leaned forward, whispering, laughing, mocking. To them, it was madness. Why would anyone waste credits on something so weak, so worthless, so pitiful? The human did not answer them, nor did he look at their jeering faces. He kept his eyes on the girl beside him, his hand never letting go of her wrist, as if she might be snatched away at any second. The auctioneer, still amused by the spectacle, tapped his staff against the podium. "Well, well," he said loudly, his grin sharp as a blade. "Perhaps the human thinks he is clever, but this purchase will not bring him glory. No warrior's prize, no servant's strength, no rare treasure, only a burden. Tell me, human, are you sure?" The man did not speak. He simply nodded once, calm and steady. That silence seemed to irritate the auctioneer more than any argument. It also gave courage to others in the crowd who now wanted to prolong the show. From the side, a tall, reptilian alien raised his hand. His scales gleamed in the light, and his sharp teeth showed as he sneered. "I bid 10 credits," he declared, his voice mocking. He had no interest in the girl. He only wanted to make the human look like a fool. The human's head turned slightly, his eyes narrowing. Then he lifted his hand again. 11. A ripple of laughter swept through the audience. "The human thinks he's rich," one shouted. "Buy her, then buy yourself a cage too," another added, drawing howls of cruel amusement. But again the human stood firm, his voice level and calm, never trembling. Another alien joined the game, a wide, slug-like creature with glistening skin. 12, he gurgled, chuckling wetly. 13, the human said without hesitation. The reptilian bared his teeth. 15, 16. The numbers climbed, not out of desire for the girl, but out of cruelty. The aliens were laughing at the human, not bidding for her. They wanted to see him break, to watch him give up, to laugh at his stubbornness until he left humiliated. Yet every number was matched. The human's hand never wavered, never lowered, no matter how much noise filled the hall. The girl trembled at his side, unable to understand. Her people had always been discarded, unwanted, treated like dirt. She had grown used to being invisible, to being worthless in the eyes of others. But now someone was fighting for her, spending credits to keep her from returning to the cage. She did not know why. Her heart raced, unsure whether to feel fear or hope. The reptilian's voice grew sharper, annoyed that the game was no longer amusing. 20, he barked. The human answered at once. 21. Gasps rose from the crowd. The laughter began to thin, replaced by whispers. This was no longer a joke. No one would waste so much on a being so useless, unless he truly wanted her. The thought unsettled them, because it meant the human's reasons were hidden, perhaps dangerous. The slug creature spat in frustration. "Bah! Not worth it!" He lowered his slimy arm. The reptilian glared, his pride wounded. 30, he growled, determined to win, not for the girl, but to crush the human's strange determination. The human lifted his hand higher, his eyes locked on the girl's trembling form. 31. His voice was calm, almost soft, yet it carried across the hall with unexpected weight. The reptilian hesitated, his jaw tightening. He looked at the girl again, then at the human, and for the first time, doubt filled his eyes. Was it worth it? To waste 30 credits for nothing? His pride screamed yes, but his sense warned no. Slowly, with visible anger, he lowered his arm. The hall grew tense. No more voices rose. The auctioneer, seeing the game end, leaned forward. Going once? Going twice? His grin faltered as silence swallowed the hall. Sold. The hammer struck again. This time, the sound was heavier, final, echoing like a judgment. The girl's chest rose and fell quickly, her breath shaky. She looked up at the human, her wide eyes filled with confusion. Why had he not given up? Why had he not laughed with the others and walked away? Why had he chosen her when no one else ever had? The auctioneer shook his head, clearly irritated now that the entertainment was over. "Take your prize, human," he spat. "Let her drag you down. You'll regret wasting even a single coin." The man did not answer. He stepped forward, placed the payment into the outstretched hands of the guard, and then reached for the girl again. His grip was steady, protective, not cruel. He guided her down from the platform, ignoring the muttered insults and mocking laughter that still lingered in the air. Around them, aliens whispered, their eyes filled with disbelief. He really took her. What could he want with such a useless thing? Humans are strange, too strange. The girl's legs shook as she followed him, still expecting at any moment for the dream to shatter, for him to reveal the same cruelty as all the others. But as they left the auction hall, his pace slowed so she could walk beside him. His head stayed high, unshaken by the crowd's scorn. The laughter behind them grew faint. The further they walked, the quieter the market became. For the first time in her life, the girl was not being pushed, beaten, or mocked. She was being led away from the cage, away from the stage, away from the hands that had treated her as worthless. Her small hand trembled in his. He did not let go. His hand had gone up in the hall, and it had never come down. Not for mockery, not for threats, not for shame. And now, with each step forward, the girl began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he truly meant to protect her. The narrow alleys of the market were crowded, filled with strange smells, broken lights, and voices shouting in dozens of alien tongues. The human walked quickly, his long steps steady, his hand still holding the small alien girl's wrist so she wouldn't be lost in the chaos. She stumbled at first, unused to anyone guiding her instead of pushing her, but he slowed his pace enough for her to keep up. Behind them, the echoes of laughter from the auction still followed like ghosts, but the further they went, the quieter it became. The girl's eyes darted everywhere, full of fear. Every shadow looked dangerous. Every noise sounded like a threat. She expected someone to snatch her back, to drag her into another cage. She did not understand why this man had taken her, why he had fought so calmly against the mockery of the crowd. Her heart told her not to trust him. No one had ever shown her kindness before, and she could not believe this was real. They reached a quieter street where the stalls sold food instead of slaves. The smell of cooked meat and fresh bread filled the air. The human stopped at one of the vendors, surprising the girl. She expected him to sell her back, to trade her for something else, but instead he pulled out coins and pointed at food. A warm piece of bread wrapped in cloth was handed to him, along with a small bottle of clean water. He knelt down so his eyes met hers. His face was calm, his voice low and even. "Eat." She froze, staring at the food in disbelief. Her hands shook as he placed the bread into them. Slowly, carefully, she lifted it to her lips and took the smallest bite. The warmth spread through her mouth, and her empty stomach ached as if it couldn't believe food was finally there. She ate faster, crumbs falling onto her lap, while tears filled her eyes. The man said nothing, only watched to make sure she swallowed safely. When she coughed, he gave her the bottle of water. The water was clean, pure, unlike the dirty liquid she had drunk before in the cages. She drank until she gasped for breath, then hugged the bottle tightly as if someone would take it away. But no one tried. The human only waited. When her hunger had eased, he stood and bought a blanket from another stall. The material was rough but warm. He wrapped it around her shoulders, pulling it tight so it wouldn't slip. She looked up at him, confused. "Why?" Her voice cracked, soft as a whisper. He didn't answer fully, only said, "You're safe now." She wanted to believe, but her heart was full of doubt. Safety was not real in her world. Safety always broke apart. She shook her head slowly, whispering again, "No one. Safe." The man's eyes softened, though his expression stayed firm. He didn't argue, didn't try to convince her with big promises. Instead, he began walking again, leading her away from the noise of the market. The alleys grew darker as they moved further from the center. Lamps flickered, casting long shadows against the walls. The girl clutched the blanket tightly, glancing at every doorway. The human's grip on her hand never loosened. She noticed that. Not rough, not painful, just steady. At one point, a group of aliens stepped out from a side street, blocking their way. Their eyes fell on the girl and then on the human. "What do you have there, human?" one of them sneered. "That's nothing but trash. Give her to us, and we'll show you how to use her properly." The girl's heart froze. She had seen scenes like this before. Mockery, threats, cruelty. Her body trembled as she prepared for the man to hand her over. But instead, his stance shifted. He stepped in front of her, placing himself between her and the strangers. His eyes were sharp, cold, warning. "Move," he said simply. The aliens laughed, thinking he was weak, but something in his tone made them pause. His voice was quiet, but behind it was steel. After a tense moment, the group spat on the ground and walked away, muttering curses. The girl stared at his back in shock. No one had ever stood in front of her before. No one had ever taken a threat for her sake. She clutched the blanket tighter, her small voice whispering again. "Why?" The man didn't answer this time either. He just kept walking until they reached the outskirts of the market, where the noise faded and the streets opened into quieter paths. He led her to a small outpost made of metal sheets and stone. It was not grand, but it was clean and safe looking. Inside, the space was simple. A bed, a table, some tools, and supplies stacked neatly. The human guided her in, letting her sit on the edge of the bed. She touched the blanket again, still unable to believe. Her eyes stayed on him, waiting for the moment he would reveal his true purpose. He poured water into a small cup and placed it in her hands. He pulled out basic medicine and gently examined the bruises on her arms. She flinched, expecting pain, but his hands were careful, almost gentle. He cleaned her wounds, wrapped them, and said nothing of his reasons. Finally, she asked again, her voice breaking. "Why me?" The man paused, his eyes dark with memories. For a moment, she thought he would stay silent forever. But then he spoke softly. "Because I saw myself in you." The girl didn't understand, but something in his tone made her chest tighten. She had no idea what his past was, no idea what he meant. But for the first time, his words did not sound like lies. That night, as the dim light of the outpost flickered, she curled up under the blanket he had given her. Her eyes stayed open for a long time, watching the human sitting near the door, as if guarding her. She still didn't trust him completely. She still thought safety was impossible. But deep inside, a seed of hope had been planted. She held the blanket closer, her heart whispering a question she dared not speak aloud. Was this man truly different? Was this the first time in her life that someone wanted her not as a burden, not as trash, but as something worth protecting? The girl woke to the sound of metal tools clinking softly. The small outpost was quiet, except for the human moving at the table, fixing something with his hands. She lay still under the blanket, unsure if she was truly safe or only dreaming. The air smelled clean, and for once, there was no shouting, no chains, no laughter mocking her sighs. She pulled the blanket tighter, her eyes following his every move. When he noticed she was awake, he turned, not startled, just calm. He placed a cup of warm broth in front of her. "Drink," he said simply. She sat up slowly, her bruises aching, and took the cup. It was warm against her fingers, and she sipped carefully, feeling strength return to her body. She studied his face as he watched her. There was no cruelty there, no mocking smile, but there was something hidden, something heavy in his eyes. Her voice, weak but curious, slipped out. "Why me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and looked at the small fire burning in the corner. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then he said quietly, "Because I saw myself in you." She frowned, not understanding. He must have seen her confusion, because he sighed and spoke again, his words slower this time. "When I was young, I was alone. No family. No one wanted me either. They laughed. They pushed me down. I was nothing, just like they called you." The girl's wide eyes blinked, trying to imagine a human like him being unwanted. He was tall, strong, someone who seemed unshakable, yet his voice carried truth, not lies. She felt her chest tighten. He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "I fought to survive. Every day, I told myself I had to keep standing, no matter how many times they tried to break me. When I saw you on that stage, shaking, with everyone laughing, I remembered myself. And I couldn't let it happen again. Not to you." His words fell heavy in the small room. The girl lowered her gaze to the blanket wrapped around her. She wanted to speak, but her throat tightened. All she managed was a whisper. No one ever said that before. The man did not smile. He only gave a small nod, as if the conversation was enough. But in her heart, something shifted. For the first time, she began to believe he did not buy her for cruelty. He had seen her, really seen her, not as a joke or trash, but as someone worth saving. She wanted to ask more, but before she could, a sound outside broke the silence. The human's head turned sharply. His body tensed, alert like a soldier. He stood and moved to the door, checking through a narrow slit. His jaw tightened. The girl's fear returned instantly. "What is it?" she whispered. "Trouble," he answered. His voice was steady, but she saw his hand move to the weapon resting near the wall. Through the cracks, she could hear footsteps and hushed voices. More than one, maybe 5 or 6. Shadows moved outside, then a harsh knock shook the metal door. "Open up, human," a voice barked. It was rough, commanding, filled with arrogance. "You have something that does not belong to you. Hand over the girl." Her blood turned cold. She clutched the blanket tighter, shaking her head. She had known this safety was only an illusion. They had come for her, as they always did. Her heart screamed at her to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The human didn't move toward the door. Instead, he shifted closer to her and crouched so they were at eye level. His voice was calm, steady, like unshaken stone. "Stay behind me." She stared at him, unable to speak. He turned, grabbed his weapon, and moved to the door. The knocking grew louder, turning into pounding fists. "Last warning, human. Give her up or we break in." He didn't answer. Instead, he opened the door a crack and stepped out, shutting it behind him before she could follow. She pressed her ear against the metal wall, her heart thundering. Outside, voices clashed. The leader of the group sneered. "Do you know who you've taken? That girl isn't yours. She was marked for someone powerful. Hand her over, and maybe we'll let you live." The human's reply was calm but sharp. "She belongs to no one. Not you. Not them. Not anyone." Laughter erupted, cruel and mocking. "A human protecting trash? You'll die for this foolishness." Then came the sound of movement, boots scraping against stone, weapons being raised. The girl covered her ears, terrified, but soon after came the crash of a fight. Sharp thuds, grunts, the ring of metal striking, bodies falling. She pressed herself against the wall, shaking, tears filling her eyes. She wanted to shut it out, but she couldn't. He was fighting for her. The noise lasted only minutes, though to her, it felt like hours. Then silence. Her breath caught when the door opened again. The human stepped back inside, his chest rising with heavy breaths, his clothes marked with dust and blood that was not his. His eyes were hard, but his voice was steady as he said, "It's done." She gasped, staring at him. You fought them?" He set the weapon down and nodded once. "They won't bother us tonight." Her small hands clutched the blanket tighter, her eyes shining with fear and awe. No one had ever fought for her. Not once. People always abandoned her, mocked her, or sold her. But this man had faced armed hunters without hesitation. For her. She whispered again, this time almost to herself. "Why? Why do you risk so much?" He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Because no one risked anything for me. I won't repeat that mistake." The girl lowered her head, hiding her tears in the blanket. In her chest, something warm grew, unfamiliar but strong. She had been worthless in everyone else's eyes, but not his. In his eyes, she was worth fighting for. That night, as he sat by the door keeping watch, she lay awake, listening to the quiet. For the first time in her life, she did not dream of cages or chains. She dreamed of the human's steady hand that never went down, and of the promise in his voice that she was safe, even if the whole galaxy said otherwise. The night was heavy with silence after the fight, but the human did not sleep. He sat near the door, weapon resting across his knees, eyes sharp and watchful. The girl curled in the corner, clutching the blanket he had given her, too shaken to rest. Every creak outside made her jump. Every gust of wind felt like footsteps returning. She stared at him, wondering why he didn't show fear. He looked steady, unmovable, like stone. Hours passed, and the quiet became unbearable. She whispered softly, her voice trembling, "They will come back." He glanced at her, then nodded. "Yes, they will." Her heart sank. She had hoped for denial, some comfort, but he always spoke truth. He leaned forward, adjusting his weapon, and continued, "They will come harder, stronger, but I'll be ready." She hugged her knees, trying to believe him, but the fear was too strong. All her life, danger had always won. Safety never lasted. She wanted to trust him, but in her chest, doubt grew like a shadow. Before dawn, heavy footsteps echoed again outside. This time, there were more of them. She froze, eyes wide. The human stood, calm but alert, and checked his weapon. The first knock was not a knock at all. It was a crash, a blow against the metal door. Dust shook from the walls. Voices shouted from outside. "Open up! By order of the Lord, hand over the girl, or you'll be dragged out in pieces." Her blood ran cold. She crawled to the corner, pulling the blanket over her head as if it could hide her. She heard the human's voice, firm and steady, louder than before. "Leave. She is not yours." Laughter followed, cruel and loud. The pounding grew stronger, until finally the door burst open. Armed aliens poured in, their eyes shining with greed and hate. The girl screamed and pressed herself against the wall, her body shaking uncontrollably. The human moved instantly. His weapon flashed, his body a wall between her and the attackers. The first alien lunged, but was met with a strike that dropped him to the ground. Another swung a blade, only to be thrown back by a kick that shook the floor. The fight was chaos. Shouts, clashes, bodies slamming into walls. The girl could barely breathe as she watched. She thought he would fall under their numbers, that they would crush him like they always crushed everything good in her life. But he did not fall. Every movement was precise, controlled, as if he had trained his whole life for this. His face never showed panic, only focus. One of the attackers managed to break past him, rushing toward the girl. She shrieked and tried to crawl away, but before the alien could reach her, the human slammed into him, pulling him down with brutal force. Blood splattered across the floor. The man stood over her, breathing hard, his body tense like a shield. "Stay down," he said firmly. The fight raged on, but slowly the tide shifted. One by one, the intruders fell, groaning or unconscious, until finally, silence returned. The floor was littered with bodies, the air thick with the smell of blood and sweat. The girl's chest rose and fell in fast bursts, her eyes locked on him, wide with terror and awe. He wiped his weapon clean, his hands steady even after the violence. He looked at her then, and for the first time, she saw something softer in his eyes, relief that she was still alive. "They'll keep coming," he said, his voice quieter now. "Stronger forces next time. This was only a test." She couldn't speak, her throat closed with fear. She hugged the blanket, rocking slightly, her mind screaming that this was too much. No one could fight forever. He couldn't fight the whole world for her. But he crouched down in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "I will not give you back. No matter who comes, no matter what they send, you are not their property." Her tears spilled. She shook her head, whispering, "They'll kill you. They always win." He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, surprising her with the calmness of his touch. "Not this time. Not while I'm here." His words carried a weight she had never heard before. It wasn't empty comfort. It wasn't a lie. It was a vow. Something inside her wanted to believe it, wanted to cling to it as the only light in the darkness. That night, after the attackers had been dragged outside and silence returned, she lay awake again. But this time, her fear was mixed with something new. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him standing tall against enemies twice his size, unyielding, unbroken. For her. She whispered softly into the blanket, words he did not hear. "Why? Why do you fight for me?" Outside, the stars glittered coldly, and in the distance, she could still hear faint shouts as news of the fight spread. They would not stop. More would come. But deep inside, for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, he was strong enough to protect her. The human sat awake near the door, his weapon ready, his gaze sharp. But when he glanced back at her, his eyes softened for only a second. She didn't see it, but in that moment, his silent promise grew even stronger. He had raised his hand for her once in the auction, and now he had raised it again in battle. And just as before, he had never lowered it. The ruins were cold and broken, the walls cracked and covered in moss. Wind whispered through empty stone arches, carrying the smell of dust and forgotten fires. The human led the girl through the ruins, his steps steady, his weapon always close at hand. She stayed behind him, clutching her blanket, her small feet echoing softly on the stone floor. The outpost was no longer safe, and he had chosen this place to hide. It was far from the city, far from the market, and hopefully far from those who hunted her. They settled in a corner where the walls were still strong enough to block the wind. He built a small fire, its glow flickering across the stone. The girl sat close, her wide eyes never leaving him. She wanted to ask questions, but fear and doubt kept her quiet. She watched as he carefully checked the perimeter again, scanning the shadows as if danger was hiding in every corner. Finally, when he returned to the fire, she whispered, "They won't stop." He looked at her, his expression calm but serious. "No, They won't. Her small fingers gripped the blanket tighter. Then why? Why do you fight? Why not leave me? I bring you danger. I bring you death. The man did not answer at first. He leaned back against the wall, staring into the fire. His voice came slowly, like each word carried weight. Because leaving you would be the same as leaving myself all over again. Her breath caught. She remembered his earlier words about being unwanted, about being alone. She didn't understand fully, but something inside her stirred. She looked down, whispering, I don't understand. I'm nothing. Why risk so much? He leaned forward, his eyes sharp, not with anger, but with truth. You're not nothing. You've survived this long when no one wanted you. That is strength. They fear you because of it. She frowned, confused. Fear me? No one fears me. They laugh at me. He shook his head. They laugh because they don't want to admit what they see. A survivor. Someone they couldn't destroy, no matter how much they tried. That's why they want you back. You're proof they're not as strong as they believe. Her heart raced. No one had ever said such words to her. Her entire life, she had been told she was weak, useless, nothing. Yet this human, who could have abandoned her, saw something different. Slowly, her voice came, trembling. I have secrets about my people, about why we were hunted. If I tell you, will you still protect me? His eyes locked on hers, firm, unwavering. Yes. She hesitated, then pulled the blanket tighter around her small body. My kind, we were not made small by accident. We were changed. Long ago, our enemies feared us, so they made us weak. They called us broken. But inside us, in our blood, something still remains. Knowledge, power. They want it gone. They want us erased so no one remembers what we were. The firelight flickered on her face as she spoke, her eyes wet with tears. I am the last of my family. They killed the others. I survived because I was too small to be noticed. But they found me, and they caged me. That is why they will not stop. They don't care about me. They care about ending what I carry. The human listened in silence, his jaw tight. When she finished, he leaned closer. Then they are right about one thing. You are important, more than you know, and that means I will fight harder, not less. Her tears fell freely now. She covered her face, shaking her head. I don't want you to die for me. I don't want to bring more death. He reached out and gently pulled her hands away from her face. His voice was steady, firm, but softer than before. Listen, I've seen too many lives thrown away, too many people crushed because no one stood for them. I won't let that happen to you. I will not let them erase you. Her heart thudded in her chest. She had never heard anyone speak like this, never been told she mattered. She whispered, barely audible, Why do you care so much? He leaned back, eyes still locked on hers. Because once I wished someone cared for me, but no one came. So now I will be that someone for you. The girl sat frozen, her tears drying slowly on her cheeks. She wanted to argue, to tell him it was hopeless, but her words would not come. Deep inside, something fragile was breaking, her belief that she was worthless. His words were planting something new, something she had never dared feel before. Hope. The night stretched on, but for the first time she spoke without fear. She told him about her people, about the songs they once sang, about the hidden places they built before they were destroyed. She spoke of her mother's lullabies, of stories whispered before sleep. The human listened without interruption, his face calm but intent, as if every word was a treasure. When she grew tired, she curled up near the fire, but before sleep claimed her, she looked at him one last time. He was still sitting guard, his weapon across his knees, his eyes on the shadows. For a moment, she whispered a final thought. You make me feel not broken. He didn't reply, but the way his eyes softened told her he heard. The fire crackled softly, the ruins holding their secrets. But inside that broken place, something new was being built. A bond. A promise. A fragile trust that grew stronger with every word, every action. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since she could remember, she fell asleep not as a prisoner, not as a burden, but as someone protected, someone seen. The human kept his silent watch, and though enemies would come again, in that moment, neither of them felt as alone as they once had. The morning sky was gray when the sound of marching feet reached the ruins. The girl woke with a start, clutching the blanket, her heart thundering in her chest. The human was already standing, his weapon in hand, his eyes sharp and steady. He had been waiting for this. Outside, voices echoed louder than before. This time it was not just a few hunters or enforcers. It was an army, The girl could hear orders shouted, the stomp of boots, the rattle of armor. They had come in full force, and they had come for her. She crawled to the wall, peeking through a crack. Her breath caught. Dozens of soldiers filled the ruins outside, their weapons gleaming, their banners high. And at their center stood the alien lord himself, tall, armored, his eyes cruel and full of pride. His voice thundered, carrying across the stone. "Human, you have taken what belongs to me. Step aside, and perhaps I'll let you live. Hand her over, or be crushed." The girl trembled. She had known this moment would come, but now that it was here, the fear was unbearable. She turned to the human, her voice breaking. "You can't fight them. It's too many. Please, don't do this for me." He looked at her, his expression calm but fierce. "I told you, you're not theirs. You're not anyone's but your own." Before she could answer, he stepped out of the ruins, onto the broken courtyard. The soldiers parted, making a path for him, their eyes watching with curiosity and scorn. Whispers spread quickly. A single human standing against an army, it was madness. Yet he stood tall, unshaken. The alien lord sneered. "You are a fool. Do you think you can stand against me? Against all of us? For her?" He pointed toward the girl, his voice filled with disdain. "She is nothing. She is weak. She is worth less than the dust under your feet." The human's voice rang out clear, steady, unyielding. "She's not nothing. She is alive. She has survived everything you tried to erase. And today, she is mine, because I chose her." A hush fell over the crowd. His words cut through the air like steel. The girl pressed her hands over her mouth, tears filling her eyes. No one had ever claimed her like that, not with cruelty or greed, but with choice, with conviction. The alien lord's face twisted in rage. "Then you will die with her." He raised his arm, and the soldiers surged forward. The human moved first. His weapon flashed, his body swift and sharp. The first soldier fell before the others even reached him. He fought like fire, each strike fueled by unbreakable will. The girl watched from the ruins, her heart pounding with fear and awe. Every time it looked like he would fall, he rose again, stronger. His voice echoed in her mind. "I will not give you back." But the numbers were overwhelming. The soldiers pressed harder, surrounding him. The alien lord laughed, certain of his victory. "See how weak humans truly are. One man cannot stand against us all." The girl's tears spilled down her cheeks. She wanted to run to him, to scream, to stop it, but she was powerless, her small body trembling. Then, in the chaos, she remembered his words. "You're not nothing. You've survived this long. That is strength." Her hands clenched. She stood, shaky but determined, and stepped out of the ruins. The soldiers nearest her froze in surprise. She raised her voice, though it cracked with fear. "He is not alone. If you want him, you will have to take me too." The crowd gasped. The alien lord's eyes narrowed in fury. "Silence, worm!" he shouted. The human, bloodied and bruised, turned his head slightly. When his eyes met hers, something burned inside them, a fire that only grew stronger at her defiance. He roared, his strikes faster, harder, fueled by more than survival now. He fought for her voice, for her choice, for the bond they had built. One by one, the soldiers began to fall. The laughter faded, replaced by shouts of fear and anger. The human fought like a storm, unrelenting, his every move declaring that he would not bend. Finally, he reached the alien lord. Their clash shook the courtyard, blade against blade, strength against strength. The lord was larger, stronger, but the human was faster, smarter, and his will did not break. In the end, with one final strike, the alien lord fell to his knees, defeated, his voice choking with disbelief. A human? The human stood over him, his chest rising with heavy breaths. His voice was low, but clear. Yes, a human. With that, he struck the final blow. Silence swept across the courtyard. The soldiers, leaderless, stepped back in shock. None dared move against him now. Slowly, the human lowered his weapon and turned toward the girl. She ran to him, her small feet stumbling, her blanket trailing behind her. She threw her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. He knelt, wrapping one arm around her gently despite his wounds. "You never put your hand down," she whispered through her sobs. "Not at the auction. Not in the fights. Not even now." He rested his forehead against hers, his voice rough but steady. "And I never will." Around them, the soldiers watched in silence. The girl, once mocked as worthless, now stood beside the man who had defeated their leader. The crowd that had laughed at her now bowed their heads, some in fear, some in respect. The girl clung to him, her heart no longer weighed down by shame. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, protected, chosen. And the human, scarred but unbroken, had kept his vow. In the ruins of the battlefield, with the army retreating and the echoes of laughter gone, she finally believed the truth he had carried from the start. She was not nothing. She was not weak. She was alive, and she mattered. And as the human carried her away from the courtyard, her small voice whispered once more, full of quiet wonder, "You chose me, and you never let go."